con nosotros en su programa Café con Leche, la voz de los latinos en América. Estamos transmitiendo desde hermosa 1470 AM. Could you please turn on this microphone? Y para todo el mundo a través de cafeconlecheradio.com. Les habla Lilia Galindo y tengo a Thomas Elias. Él es un analista político que aparece en muchísimos periódicos en todo el estado de California, aquí en el Valle del Antílope, 2 veces a la semana. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Muy bien.
Qué bueno.
Very well. How are you, Lilia?
I am doing fine. And do you know what is going to be our topic for today? There are so many things happening. And what do you think? What do you want to talk about?
I think I'd like to talk a little bit about how much easier it's going to be for men in the legislature to get away with sexual harassment of women staffers from now on because of what a court did in Sacramento this past week. To me, that's a very interesting case. I mean, we have had, over the last 5 years, we've had 7 state legislators basically thrown out for harassing women staffers up there. That includes Matt Zabobna, Tony Mendoza, Autumn Burke, a woman in this case, Raul Bocanegra, Steve Fox, and none of them were able to confront women who were complaining about them as witnesses because that was against the rules in the legislature. The women were allowed to testify in private, and they were.
Se nos está cortando
that's changed now.
Bueno, dice que quiere platicar acerca de unos cambios que hubo en la legislatura por la decisión de un juez de la Corte en lo que se respecta a cómo se va a atacar el problema del abuso sexual de algunos legisladores, asambleístas o senadores que abusan de su personal femenino, y dice que ya se ha castigado. Hubo 7 legisladores que fueron acusados y que ahora todo cambia a partir de una decisión de la Corte. Then what happened? What changed?
Okay, what changed is that about 2 weeks ago, who was appointed by Brown about 8 years ago, ruled that Matt Zabobna, who was investigated and forced to quit the legislature in 2017, is entitled to the names of all of the 52 women who complained about him. This guy actually caused 52 women to complain about him. And most of these women are not accustomed to public speaking. They're not accustomed to testifying in court. If they had to be identified publicly and testify in public, they never would have come forward. And that's still true of most of the legislative staffers. They're secretaries and clerks of all types, and they're not trained for public speaking, and so it's very easy for an attorney. You saw, for instance, how Harvey Weinstein's lawyers went after the women that testified against him in his trial. There were in Harvey Weinstein, the movie mogul we're talking about, who was convicted of rape during the past week. But really, only 4 women came forward and testified in court out of 26 who had formally complained about it, because the rest of them did not want to be identified and were not prepared to speak in public. Remember, these are very private moments. In the case of Matt Zabobna, the most prominent woman who testified against him, for instance, was a lobbyist by the name of Patricia Lopez, who claimed that in 2016, she and Zabobna went to a convention together in Las Vegas, and he pushed her into a bathroom, and he pulled down his pants, and he wanted her to do things to him, and he forced her to do things to him, and she was willing to go public, but the other 51 women who came forward to complain about the same man, uh, some of them reporting very similar things, supposedly. Um, they were not ready to testify in public because they felt a certain amount of shame, and there's a certain shyness involved in these sexual things. And so um, now that this one judge has ordered the names made public of all of these people, um, no one can be sure that they'll have privacy, even though the legislature has passed a rule saying that in cases involving members of the legislature, there will be privacy. But this judge went against that rule and overruled the attorneys for the legislature who argued against it.
Bueno, nos está hablando cómo este juez hizo la decisión que ahora cualquier mujer que haga cualquier del staff, y dice, ha habido muchísimos casos donde se les prometió, o dice la ley, la legislatura dice que va a haber privacidad cuando alguien declare en contra de alguno de los abusos sexuales. Dice, porque el problema es que hay muchísimos casos de abuso sexual de algunos de los legisladores, y las mujeres, pues, dice, no están preparadas para hablar en público. Esta decisión del juez hace que ellas, las que quieran presentar una demanda, tienen que dar sus nombres, y dice, obviamente, pues eso no le va a gustar a nadie. Este juez hizo esta decisión en contra de esta regla que ya está dentro de la legislatura, que habrá privacidad, pero ha habido muchísimos abusos, y nos platica de una joven que ella sí se atrevió a decirlo públicamente. Su nombre es Patricia López, y dice, ella habló del abuso de una de los asambleístas, y dijo que la había forzado a entrar al baño y que luego la quería forzar a hacer otras cosas, o la había forzado. Dice, pero la mayoría de las mujeres no se van a querer exponer a que su nombre esté en público, ya que se sepa lo que está ocurriendo. Yo creo que con esa decisión este juez les ha quitado el poder a las mujeres de defenderse en contra de los abusos de legisladores.
So by having to go public, though, won't that ensure that the veracity or the truth of what the allegations are?
Well, that's one argument, and that's the argument that the judge in this instance bought. But in point of fact, these women have in the legislature, these women staffers have testified in private in the investigations conducted by the legislature itself of its own members, and that those investigations have resulted in, over the last 5 years, 7 people getting thrown out. Or being forced to retire. Mm-hmm. So the truth has come out.
Do they testify? Do they testify under oath?
Resign. For instance, Bob Hertzberg is a longtime state senator who was accused of sexual harassment by some women, and he said that all he ever did is hug people. He never did anything lascivious or anything very sexually suggestive. But I know Bob Hertzberg, and I know he loves to hug everybody he runs into. And so Bob Hertzberg served out his term in the Senate. Nobody ever threw him out. He ran for county supervisor in the last election and lost, but he didn't lose because of that. So I would argue that in the case of an organization like the legislature, which is set up to conduct investigations of its own members, sometimes that the truth will come out, even if it's done in private. But what you're going to have now, with the prospect of the women being identified publicly and possibly cross-examined someplace, is you'll have many fewer women coming forward, because they don't want to be exposed in public. They don't want to have to speak in public. They're not trained for it, many of them. There are, of course, a few that are trained for it, and do speak in public. This lobbyist, Patricia Lopez, was one example of that. In the Harvey Weinstein trial, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, the wife of the governor, who used to be in movies, she was another one who was trained to speak publicly and did speak publicly and went public in that trial. And is one of the reasons why Weinstein was convicted the other day. But what we're having now is basically open season on sexual harassment in the state legislature. That's what this ruling actually means.
Okay, let me translate. Lo que el juez Dana Lamont estaba exponiendo, dice, pero entonces se garantiza de que se les está diciendo que la persona que declara está diciendo la verdad. Dice, pues sí, sí se garantiza. La diferencia es que se van a tener que publicar los nombres y muchas personas no van a querer decir sus nombres. And the last question then that you made that Tom didn't hear you, could you repeat it?
When they testify privately, do they testify under oath?
Yes.
That's it. La pregunta es si cuando testifican las personas que se quejan de abuso sexual ya sea de los asambleístas o de los senadores, testifican bajo bajo juramento de decir verdad. Dice que sí. Y lo que se trata es que ahora con este cambio de la situación, pues no solamente van a testificar privadamente, ¿no? Sino a lo mejor van a tener otro abogado que los defienda. Dice, en esta pasada año, siete legisladores del estado fueron removidos o salieron por este tipo de acusaciones. Así es que it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Can they go to a higher court to appeal the decision?
These aren't really decisions. These are findings of the legislative committee. Okay. And once they're made public and the harassers are exposed publicly, they generally quit. They generally resign from the legislature. That's what happened with the Bobna. That's what happened with Rodney Wright. That's what happened with Steve Fox, who in fact used to represent the Antelope Valley. It happened with Boca Negra, happened with Tony Mendoza, happened with Autumn Burke. So these people...
Tom, we have to go. We have to go because the time is gone. Thank you so much for being with us. Hasta la vista. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Bye-bye.